All right. Microsoft abruptly terminated the accounts of multiple actually, FOSS projects. Employers are now using personal data to figure out the lowest salary that you'll accept. And the FBI was able to recover deleted signal messages from a device's local notification database. Busy week this week coming up on This Week in Privacy number 48. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we discuss the latest updates with what we've been working on within the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity. I'm Jordan, and with me this week is Nate. How are you doing, Nate?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a good week. How are you?
I'm doing good. Getting ready to dive into this top story here. So this week, kind of a huge story that's been going around, Microsoft abruptly terminates VeraCrypt account, halting Windows updates. So basically, quoting from the article, Microsoft has terminated an account associated with VeraCrypt, a popular and long-running piece of encryption software, throwing future Windows updates of the tool into doubt. VeraCrypt's developer told 404 Media. The move highlights the sometimes delicate supply chain involved in the publication of open source software, especially software that relies on big companies, even tangentially. So according to the VeraCrypt developer, I didn't receive any emails from Microsoft, nor any prior warnings. VeraCrypt is an open source tool for encrypting data at rest. Users can create encrypted partitions on their drives or make individual encrypted volumes to store their files in. Like its predecessor, TrueCrypt, which VeraCrypt is based on, it also lets users create a second innocuous-looking volume if they are compelled to hand over their credentials. And I'd also like to add, you can actually do full disk encryption with VeraCrypt. This is why this is quite a concerning move, because if you lose access to your full disk encryption, then obviously you're not going to be able to access your files. So that is kind of a big concern here as well. And I guess moving on to the second thing here, WireGuard VPN developer also can't ship software updates after Microsoft locks their account. So if you didn't know already, WireGuard is a protocol that most VPN providers use to facilitate the VPN connections. And they also have an official WireGuard app that you can use with your WireGuard profiles. And this app on Windows is currently not being able to be updated because the WireGuard developer has also been locked out of their Microsoft developer account. So that means that they can't ship software updates to Windows users. Jason Donenfeld, the creator of open source WireGuard VPN software, told TechCrunch that he has been locked out of his Microsoft developer account and as a result cannot sign drivers or ship updates for WireGuard for Windows users, which are critical for its software to run. And I think probably the most concerning thing here is if there was a critical vulnerability found in WireGuard VPN on Windows, they wouldn't be able to ship an update and get it fixed. So this is kind of a concerning thing to be happening right now. But we did see that there was a sort of update to this story. So we did want to mention this immediately off the bat. Zach Whitaker from TechCrunch did a Mastodon post saying that he had contact from VeraCrypt and WireGuard, both telling them that they had regained access following their Microsoft account lockouts and can now release updates again. So that was on the 11th of April, and a lot of these articles were coming out on the April the 8th. So it took a couple of days for this to happen, and I guess a lot of backlash actually. So there's this article here from Bleeping Computer that also goes a little bit more into depth about how this worked. So according to the VeraCrypt developer, his account was actually terminated, which basically you need to have a Microsoft developer account to sign Windows drivers and the bootloader. I believe this is because the secure boot process, if the drivers aren't signed, then it won't be able to load properly or something like that. I've tried to contact Microsoft through various channels, but I've only received automated replies and bots. I was unable to reach a human. I cannot publish Windows updates. So I think this story kind of highlights the concern of trusting a centralized entity with the update process. So in this case, Microsoft does have quite a lot of control over which developers can actually create apps and updates on their platform, which, we obviously oppose this because people should be able to run whatever software they want on their computer. They shouldn't be held hostage by a corporation. And I think in this case, it also ended up being a kind of security risk because they weren't able to release updates and there could have been a critical vulnerability found. But I do want to mention that WireGuard VPN is notoriously very stable, and the amount of updates that have been published for it have been quite minimal, and there haven't been that many critical vulnerabilities found. So that is a benefit. It's also because the WireGuard protocol is much leaner than other protocols like OpenVPN, so that does benefit it in that circumstance. In this article here from TechCrunch, this article here from Bleeping Computer, it also stated that dev teams from Windscribe and Memtest 86 have also been locked out of their accounts too. So big issues for Windscribe and Memtest 86. And it is kind of concerning that this happened without any warning, no notification, just these developers trying to access their accounts and they weren't able to. So, and like Jonah said here in the chat, he said almost like having a triopoly on app stores isn't a good idea. Yeah, I think we should be trying to focus more on having more app stores, having alternative ways to install software. I think, yeah, I mean, one of the benefits with Windows is you don't have to use the App Store to install apps. You can actually install them independently, which is a benefit. But it also, like we said in this story, there is a element of control that Microsoft has because you need their permission to sign drivers and write to the bootloader. So if you don't have that developer account, then you're not going to be able to do that properly. In that case, your users would have to basically bypass that, which is a much more technical process. Although it is possible, it's not really recommended, and a lot of users are probably going to feel unsafe about doing that. So I feel like I've talked for quite a while here. Nate, do you have any thoughts on this story so far?
Oh man, I mean, I think you covered most of it for sure. I think, yeah, it's really, I'm glad you mentioned the full disk encryption nature of VeraCrypt. I'm a VeraCrypt user myself. I will admit that. And it's VeraCrypt can be used either to encrypt specific things, like you can create a container, or you can encrypt like an external hard drive, or like you said, you can encrypt your entire Windows computer, which my wife is primarily a Windows user. I kind of dual boot in between Windows and Linux for the most part. I really just use this Mac for this and when I travel and stuff. But so that's kind of one of the first things we do, is where I'm going with that, is we encrypt our computers with VeraCrypt. And the developer, I forget which article he said it in. He may have said it in all of them. But the developer pointed out that, like, if they hadn't gotten this fixed in time before the certificate ran out, which I think would have been early June or end of June, sometime in June, then that could have potentially meant the computers wouldn't boot. And on top of it, since he can't push out an update, how are you supposed to make sure that people know, like, hey, decrypt your computers, because they might not boot? So it's really, really troubling for sure. The thing I like about the Bleeping Computer article is that it gives more of Microsoft's side of the story. And I don't like that necessarily because I care what Microsoft's opinion is, but just to have the full complete information, right? And Microsoft claims that, like, ever since I think it was April of last year, they've had this program where developers have to verify, which we're seeing that now on the Android side of things, right? And Android, it's not, I don't want to say it's not going well because it's not been rolled out yet, but like, this just shows, like, things can go wrong, even well-meaning things. Like, there are problems with this model. And so it's really confusing. Like, did these people just somehow miss the notifications? Was there some kind of glitch where they didn't get notified? Because the Microsoft, I think it was like a VP, was saying that like they've been sending out emails, they've been sending out notifications. He said they've been emailing everyone since October 2025. I think the guy from VeraCrypt said that he noticed this account was shut off in January. It's just we're just now finding out about it for some reason. Not like he was hiding it. He was busy trying to figure it out, and for some reason, it's just now that he's coming forward and being like, "Hey, here's where I've been for the past couple months." So, I mean, yeah, there's so many questions here, because there's again, there's like, did something just get missed? I don't know why all of these. I have a hard time believing that like Windscribe, they have a whole team. How did a whole team miss this? And like, for the record, I'm not blaming Windscribe with that. I'm blaming Microsoft. Like, I don't think Microsoft did a good job of notifying everybody if they did it all. It's really weird. I don't like to assume malice. I don't like to look at this and be like, oh, Microsoft's trying to crush open source. But I certainly have a lot of questions, and I don't understand how so much fell through the cracks and so much got missed. And it really shouldn't take all this negative media coverage for Microsoft to be able to do something. That's a big concern that I've had for years, that I've noticed years and years and years ago, that like, it was with Facebook specifically. So I used to manage bands, and one of the bands I managed wanted to change their name because there was another band with the same name that got super, super popular. So they're like, we need to rebrand because we keep getting confused with them. And like, trying to get Facebook to rename this band was literally a multiple months long deal. And it's like, why can't I just talk to a person? Like, it doesn't even have to be real time. I'm not asking to call somebody or chat with somebody. Why can't I email a human being? And it's just, everybody's trying to like cut down on the cost of, having a support staff, and they're trying to save money, and it's all about shareholders making more money and stuff. But it's just like, this is the result is things don't get like, what if this had never taken off the way it had been? Like, this would have been a really big deal. This would have been really bad. So sorry, I'm having trouble putting my thoughts in order, but yeah, it's just, this was so not cool. And I guess it makes me wonder. So like, first of all, what do you think, if you have any opinions, what do you think developers could do against this? Because I mean, it really does seem like Microsoft holds all the cards here, and I don't know, like because these are privileged software, right? I think that's the difference. We were talking about this in another chat earlier today, is like, when I install things on Windows that don't come from the Microsoft Store, even when they're unsigned, there's a little pop-up that's like, hey, this is unsigned. And I can tell it like, yeah, I know, install it anyways. But for these like really high level, very privileged things, it's like, I don't even know if there's a way around that. So, I mean, yes, in a perfect world, switch to Linux, right? But I don't know if there's any other alternatives there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, when there's a gatekeeper and that gatekeeper is Microsoft, there is like not a whole lot we can do in this case, unfortunately, which kind of sucks. Like you said, like, switching to operating systems that respect you and don't hold your computer hostage and do this sort of silliness is, I mean, I'm sure there is a security benefit from doing this, but I think, we have to look at things from like different angles as well, right? Like, what does this power that Microsoft holds, what can it be used for? And if they can lock people out of their accounts accidentally, I'm saying in quotations, very large quotations, but then what could they do if there was a foreign government that didn't really like, oh, we don't like that you're allowing people to use WireGuard VPN to bypass our firewall, or something like that, right? I think people should be able to use their computer in whatever way they want, right? We shouldn't be bowing to Microsoft's whims on what we do on our computers. So ideally, people are using Linux here. I mean, there's definitely the ability to use different repositories is great. I think it's kind of unfortunate, though, whoever controls the platform kind of gets to decide these things. And as far as I'm aware, Linux is basically the only system where there isn't a big tech corporation with ultimate control over everything, because Android, like we've kind of seen, Google owns the Android source code. So a lot of times they can exert things onto the operating system that against the user's interests, for instance. Like we've seen where they're stopping people from installing apps on their devices and stuff like that. We're still kind of monitoring that situation as well. But I think when we operate on platforms that are not controlled by the community, then that's when we run into issues like this. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much more to add unless you have something.
No, yeah, I guess just the last thing I wanted to mention is, do you happen to know off the top of your head what Privacy Guide's official encryption software recommendations are?
Off the top of my head, we do recommend VeraCrypt, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've got it pulled up here. Let's see. Can I share? Yes, sharing this tab. Okay. So it looks like we do recommend, if you're trying to upload to the cloud, we do recommend Cryptomator. We do recommend VeraCrypt. It does say that for disk encryption. Interesting. I did not know we recommended that for full disk encryption, but yeah, like I said, it can also be used for standalone to encrypt like an external disk. But oh, there it is, operating system encryption. Yeah, we typically recommend whatever it comes built in with. So like Linux distros will come with Lux, which is a Linux unified key setup. The only thing that kind of sucks is I'm told that it can only happen at the start, like when you install Linux. I don't think you can go in and add it afterwards, at least not very easily. It's kind of clunky. Macs come with File Vault, and Windows. So Windows has BitLocker. It's kind of tricky to use because originally it was only in like the upper level versions, like the Pro and the Enterprise, which typically cost a lot of money. The home version now has it if you use an online account, which we definitely do not recommend for a variety of reasons. And yeah, but there's ways to, you can upgrade to Pro, which you can usually find. Make sure they're reputable, but you can usually find resellers online who will sell them sell a Pro license for a lot cheaper and stuff like that. So BitLocker, I will be honest, me personally, I'm not too crazy about BitLocker because I've seen a lot of vulnerabilities in the past where like, there's a vulnerability found in full disk encryption and BitLocker is vulnerable to it, but VeraCrypt is not. Or I've also seen stories about like, there's a bug and now, BitLocker won't decrypt and you can't boot your operating system. You have to like recover it. So always make sure you save the recovery methods because that's really important. But at the same time, I mean, I guess to make devil's advocate argument, we know that BitLocker is secure. We did cover a story about this a while back where law enforcement requested some BitLocker keys from Microsoft, and Microsoft only had them because the whole online account thing. They were not able to get it just the, what's the word I'm looking for? They were not able to get it just from the device. As far as we know, BitLocker has not been broken by law enforcement or anything. But also, it's, I mean, we would have been in the same situation about not being able to boot had this VeraCrypt thing not happened, right? And I mean, there's also plenty of Windows softwares that break Windows even without the encryption enabled. So I guess my point is like, I think there's pros and cons, but BitLocker does have a lot going for it. Just something to be aware of. And yeah, I guess that's all I got on that one. Also, yeah, just reminder to get off Windows if possible. Like even if you dual boot, I mentioned I have Windows and Linux. I don't fully run Windows all the time. I try to use Linux whenever I can, and then I use Windows for the more PC or CPU intensive stuff like video editing and stuff like that my Linux machine just can't really handle. So I think that is all I've got. So all right. And I think if that's all we've got on that story, we are going to talk next about surveillance wages. Because, just when you think privacy can't get any worse. So this comes from MarketWatch, and it says employers are using your personal data to figure out the lowest salary that you'll accept. And man, I mean, honestly, this article really, the headline kind of says it all. So there's been a lot of talk lately about surveillance pricing. Which is where, and as far as we know, this is happening more online than in person. But companies will use the data about you to try and figure out like, oh, maybe you'll pay a little bit extra. You'll pay a little extra for this plane ticket. You'll pay a little extra for this. I think there was a story a while back that found out that if you were in the parking lot of a Target and you open the app on your store or open the website, they would actually try to charge you more because they figured that you probably weren't going to go to another store. which I don't know who's going to sit in the parking lot and then order something. That's kind of weird. But there's also been a lot of allegations about, well, I mean, actually, no, because that's this data. There's been allegations like Uber, for example, if they can tell your battery is low, that they'll charge you more because they know that you can't afford to wait for the price to go down. I don't think that was proven, but that's definitely an allegation, and I wouldn't put it past them personally. So, yeah, now the new thing is using your personal data to figure out how much to pay you, which in the past has historically been based on things like how long you've been in this industry, how long you've been at this job, what the actual job title you're applying for is, certifications, things like that. Which I'm sure will probably still play a role, but of course, now they've got to factor in things like, where did it go? Things like if you've taken out a payday loan, if you have a high credit card balance. I just made a big move, and I'm not going to lie. We moved from a very high cost of living area to a lower cost of living area. We didn't have savings because the cost of living was so high. So I've got a pretty high credit card balance right now because we use that to fund a lot of the move. So things like that. I think further down, they did talk about, I really feel the need to point out, this is not hypothetical, because I've been hearing for a long time now that this is how it works with gig work and, things like DoorDash. There are certain people who start out making more, like if I put in an order to DoorDash and it goes to two different people, two different dashers, one of them will see a higher price than the other one based on things like how picky they are with their, do they just accept every single one that comes along, or do they wait for the better ones? And the ones that typically pay more will usually go to those people first, right? Which is so predatory. It's so, I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself, but like, I don't know. Yeah. Like, okay, we'll just jump into that part because I mean, again, this story, well, okay, hold on. There is one more thing I want to point out before I jump into the analysis portion, which is they say that, the vendors that provide tools that make this possible, oh no, it's a little bit further up. Yeah, a first of its kind audit of 500 labor management artificial intelligence companies found that employers in healthcare, customer service, logistics, and retail are customers of vendors whose tools are designed to enable this practice. The report does not claim that all employers using these systems engage in wage surveillance. Instead, it warns that the growing use of algorithmic tools to analyze workers' personal data can enable pay practices. And I skipped over it earlier, but when they talk about like high credit card balance and stuff, they can also scrape your social media to see if you are more likely to join a union or could become pregnant. And I guess the last thing I'll say is I love down here, they were talking about how there are laws now that are trying to outlaw surveillance pricing, but a lot of them have not caught up to surveillance wages, except for one, which is Colorado, is trying to pass the Prohibit Surveillance Data to Set Prices and Wages Act, which would ban companies from using intimate personal data. It carves out performance-based wages, which I mean, on the surface sounds fine. I like that he says, here it is. The bill would prohibit companies from using workers' personal data without their consent to determine what they're paid. So, I mean, I read that without their consent. And I'm like, yeah, of course, that's going to be buried on page 50 of the contract, right? That's ridiculous. So, yeah, I don't know. It's anyway. So getting back to like the analysis portion of this is really frustrating. I had the privilege of interviewing someone recently that we'll talk about a little bit more coming up here, but she spoke about how a lot of this surveillance used to like set prices and set wages like this, it becomes deterministic, right? Because here's what I can see happening is you go up to your boss and you say, I think I deserve more. And your boss says, or even negotiating a new job, right? Because I've done that where I get a job and they say, we'll pay you this much. And I say, I think I deserve more. And I've successfully done that. And what happens when they come back and say, well, we can't. Like I do that. You guys may or may not know this. If you rent, sometimes you can negotiate your rent. Like I've done that. I've gone to the leasing office and been like, I don't want to pay more. Like, let's see if we can find to an agreement, and they'll walk it down a little bit. And then I've been to other places where they're like, no, that's out of our control. We can't do anything. And my fear is as this continues to grow, we're going to see more of that second thing where people are like, no, we can't do anything. It's set what it is because that's what the algorithm says. And I don't have the authority to push back on the algorithm, which is demeaning to your employees. But it's also deterministic, and it sets us in this almost like a lack of free will. I just don't want to use the word deterministic again, but it sets us in this environment where we have no freedom, really. We have no growth, because now it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter, how good you do. You'll forever hit a cap, right? And sure, those things will matter. Those things will help. But, if you've got the high credit card debt, if you've got pro-union views on social media, now you can either choose to not talk about that, or you can choose to just like forever not reach your full earning potential, which then keeps you trapped in this cycle. And it's just, oh my God, this is so predatory. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I kind of rambled a little bit on that one, but hopefully I kind of said something coherent. So
yeah, I mean, I think one important thing to add to this is we already see, like, when it comes to employment and like how much people are paid, like this is already an issue without like the surveillance stuff, right? Like we have studies that are done where, there's people that apply with the same resume, but they change the name from a female name to a male name, and then the person, they get employed more under the male name than they get more interviews under the male name than the female name. I think this is just like increasing the level of discrimination people are going to be finding themselves in, right? Like, oh, your name appears like this. And we already kind of know that these AI systems are incredibly biased against people of color, marginalized groups that are less represented. They're not as, these systems are trained on data that doesn't have them as the majority, right? So it's going to kind of deprioritize their skills and their experience, right? So I think this is sort of an additional layer to that discrimination. I think someone said here, Plants McGee said, giggles in European where this is illegal. Yeah, this is illegal in a lot of the world, actually. I'm kind of surprised that this isn't illegal in the US, but I guess that is the state of things.
You know what though? I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did want to mention that. I don't want to like get after anybody here, but I just want to point out, in my personal opinion, I think that's a dangerous attitude to have. We're like, haha, that wouldn't happen here. Just, what was it, late last year, early this year? The EU is talking about rolling back parts of GDPR to be more competitive on the AI industry. So like, yes, like laws help. Laws are good. I'm glad you guys have that. But I just really feel the need to point that out. Like, still keep an eye on this stuff, because laws can change. And I am under no delusion that European politicians care more about their citizens than the US ones. They're just, they put on a better facade about it, in my opinion. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Laws can change and that stuff can go away. We gotta make sure that we're constantly fighting for our privacy rights, not taking it for granted. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. This story is kind of, I don't know. I think, yeah, there's laws in countries like the European Union where, like, access to personal information for employment purposes is protected and not like able to be run through an algorithm or whatever. And there's laws against that in the EU. And I know in Australia, that's classified as discrimination. So it depends on the country. But like Nate said, I think it's important. Like, we can't just like say, oh, it's just the US being the US. I think we should be constantly vigilant of governments that are trying to do this stuff. Yeah, so it is a good point that AI will just be fancy autocorrect, and picking the most likely responses will inherently lead to a tyranny of the majority rather than a fair system. Exactly. So it kind of has that effect, right? I think, it's more likely to, it basically just mirrors the reality, right? In a lot of cases, which the reality is people get discriminated against, and people are paid less depending on their identity, which is, we've done studies on this. We know this is the case. It's kind of something that we're trying to fight against to stop, but it's not something we've completely solved. And yeah, I think, if we try and make sure people are aware of this, I think some of the stupid stuff that I've seen is a lot of companies are using like AI to scan people's resumes when they apply, and it will like check the keywords and stuff. And people were just like putting invisible keywords on their resumes to make it detect it. Like this is incredibly silly stuff. I can't believe I have to say this, but like we need to go back to when humans were reading resumes and interviewing people and not feeding their information through an AI system. That's also just terrible for the person's privacy. Like I don't want everyone to know my employment history or where I worked or the schools I've been to. And that's just another thing that we're feeding the AI systems. Like really, we're putting all this information through these massive AI companies with like no corporate like control, especially in the US. Like I feel like it's very lax at the moment because the entire economy is basically propped up by the AI data center industry. It does seem like that is starting to fall down a little bit now, like with a lot of data centers being canceled, but I definitely think the AI hype stuff is propping up a lot of stuff, and it kind of means that a lot of cases this behavior is allowed and when it shouldn't be. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Did you have anything more you wanted to add, Naeem?
No, I think just, yeah, it's such a, like, it doesn't matter where you are in terms of your economic beliefs. Like, even if you're a free market person, there's always going to be someone who can do the work for less. And when it's a race to the bottom like this, everyone loses. I mean, just look at airplanes, right? It's even Southwest now is doing away with their like first come first serve seating and like free check bag, because it's becoming such a competitive market, and they just, I don't know, it's such a race to the bottom. One of the headers here that I think I may have scrolled past said, judging our desperation rate, which is, again, it's just so predatory. It's one thing, like surge pricing is one thing, right? Because surge pricing looks at the entire market and says, using Uber as an example, a concert just ended. There's 10,000 people. That's probably too many. 5,000 people in this one spot trying to get home. We're going to charge more, right? But this is looking at an individual person. This is looking at you specifically and saying, I know that you've sent out 500 resumes this week. I don't know how you did that. You probably used a bot, which I wouldn't blame you. You've sent out 500 resumes this week. You've gotten 2 callbacks and you've got $1,000 left in your savings account. You will literally do anything. And I'm going to give you the bare minimum that I can to make you say yes, but also not pay you. Your other coworkers are making more than you do. Personal opinion, I've always thought it was ridiculous that, like, you're not supposed to talk about pay at work. No, I was always happy at my last job to tell people how much I was making because I wanted everyone else to know. Like, I think I've mentioned this in my last job. I was the highest paid person in our job title just by sheer coincidence and luck. I don't know how I got that. And I was very open about that, not because I wanted to brag it to everybody else, but because I was like, you guys, like, I don't think I'm better than everyone else. You guys deserve to be getting paid more too. And I would tell people that kind of stuff all the time. So, like, yeah. Jonah says 500 resumes in a week sounds like fighting AI with AI. Hey man, that's the situation we're in, right? It's AI writing emails, AI reading emails, AI responding to emails. It's, yeah, but I don't know. It's, yeah, I'm kind of going off on a rant, but it's just, this just makes me so mad because it's so, I keep using the word predatory, but it removes everything. It removes the hard work. It removes the whole, like, and again, it doesn't matter what your beliefs are. Even if you're like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps person, you can't anymore. Because it removes that possibility because they know exactly how much you need and they will never give you a penny more. It's just, it just frustrates me. So sorry, I feel really passionately about this subject.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying people should be paid a dignified amount. And yeah, I agree totally. Like, I think it is important to be, there's a weird culture around not sharing how much money you make. I'm not really sure what the reasoning is behind that, but I think it is important to be open about that, especially because, your employer, not every employer, but the people that are using this software, they are not holding back. They are doing everything in their power to pay you the least amount. So the least you can do is discuss this with your coworkers, unionize, do all those sort of things, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's too much, but I think it is important, like another thing, right? But I think, if your employer is doing this sort of stuff to employ people, name and shame, like seriously, like that is the sort of thing that people go on strike for. So I think if there's companies that are doing this, definitely try and get them to stop, because like Nate said, it's discriminatory. It's like, you know, it's removing people's power to control things.
And yeah, if you think it's not already happening, definitely go read this article, because they lay out several scenarios they looked at where it's like, this is happening, like not could happen, like this is happening in like, they mentioned, what is it? Staffing gig nurses, again, gig workers, DoorDash, Uber, like it's already happening there. There's no reason it's going to stop. And God, twice now I've had something pop into my head and then I lost it. I hate when that happens. But yeah, it's this is one of those moments where like laws, I mean, I know laws are controversial. Like people are always afraid of overregulation and afraid of, like, you know, oh, companies break laws all the time. But like, what else can we do about this? There is no, I mean, yes, we can all take our privacy seriously, and we should, regardless of whether or not this is happening. But there's really like, I don't see any way to fix this other than just straight up outlawing it. Like we were talking about earlier, this is illegal in a lot of countries. It should be illegal here in the US. It should be very illegal. Everyone should be mad and sending this to their politicians and being like, we need to outlaw this before it becomes a regular practice. Because yeah, I remember what I was going to say, because yeah, on that note, you can't tell me this is a problem that the free market is just going to fix, because like, look at Amazon. Everyone knows Amazon, especially the Amazon brand, is usually cheap garbage. And you can't tell me that Amazon became the behemoth they are today by putting out the best product. They did it by undercutting everyone else, by knocking off everyone else, by using manipulative algorithms to prioritize their crap first. I guarantee you Amazon doesn't pay for that ad slot at the beginning. It's just, this is not, yeah, this is a complicated thing to fix, and it's not just going to fix itself. That's what I'm getting at. But anyways, I think we beat that to death, unless you have something else to add there. Okay. So in a minute, we're going to talk about how the FBI was able to recover signal messages, sort of, from a locally stored database on a phone. But first, we're going to talk about some updates about what we've been working on at Privacy Guides this week. And the first thing is, we have a new interview coming out on Sunday. If you guys have not seen that yet, it's in the newsletter. Go check out privacyguides.org/livestreams. It should be there right now. That's live streams with an S on the end, just by the way. And we have an interview with the one and only Executive Director of the EFF, Cindy Cohen, will be coming out on Sunday. I'm super excited for it. I was the one who got to do the interview, and I'm still excited about it. It was really cool. She was awesome. And I think it was a really good interview. I tried to make sure it was applicable to everyone. So we talked about how to stay motivated, you know, in the fight for privacy. We talked about how to build a good community. We talked about what she learned in her time fighting with the government and her kind of insights on that. So really excited for that. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, on PeerTube, because we'll be posting it there as well. PeerTube, of course, does not have the little premiere feature, but obviously we do post everything on PeerTube as well. So make sure to check that out. And just to hype you guys up for it a little bit, on the 19th, we're also going to be interviewing Carissa Vales about her upcoming book, which is coincidentally about AI and all this stuff we just talked about. And a lot of the stuff I got, you know, a lot of the stuff I was saying about how this makes it deterministic and it removes meritocracy, like, these are all things that she talks about in her book and in her interview. So yeah. And then my last thought is that we are working on a video coming up soon that many of you have requested. And that's all I'm going to say to kind of build a little bit of hype for that. So that is what is going on the video front here. And I'm going to turn it over now to Jordan to let me know what I may have missed.
No, didn't miss anything. But we do have some other things that we've been working on more on the site updates section. So there wasn't any site updates this week, but there was Freya has put out another article here. It's about OkCupid settling after selling 3 million photos to a facial recognition company. Oh, now that's probably not what you want to hear about your dating app. But yeah, if that sounds interesting, you can check that out. Go to privacyguides.org/news to check it out. And we've also been our activism lead, M, has been working on a section for the website, which if you haven't caught it already, there was the privacy activist toolbox has been released. So you can visit that by going to privacyguides.org/activism. There's the privacy activist toolbox, which came out a couple of weeks ago. And that has a lot of tips about how to be an effective privacy activist. There's a lot of great tips in there, but she's also released this new there's a pull request here on GitHub, and basically it's for a DPA directory. So there's data protection authorities, and that's the basically the organizations that you need to contact to lodge a complaint with. So this pull request has got basically all the regions in the world. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if, yeah, basically every region that you would think. I'm sure there could be some that we're missing, but I think Em has done a really good job here and has covered, I think, basically all of them, but there could be small ones that we didn't find. So if there is any of those, I guess you could take a look at the pull request and suggest adding those. But so far, what we've got is Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, and South America. So basically, it will list the privacy law in particular, the abbreviation, the Data Protection Authority, so you can click on that. And there's also a contact page link and a complaint link. So you can basically get directly to the page that has the complaint form. So basically what we're trying to do with this is make it as easy as possible for people to make a complaint against a company, against a government, because, you know, this is kind of important to utilize, because, you know, if you don't use your privacy rights, well, you're not going to have privacy. So, you know, if there's companies that are misusing your data, or if you want to get something deleted, I think using this DPA directory is going to be really helpful. So definitely stay tuned for that. I know Jonah said he was taking a look at the pull request, so I'm sure it'll be released in the next couple of weeks. So it does look really nice. Definitely check out the pull request on GitHub. There's a preview there, but it's really well put together. So I definitely recommend checking that out. It has, you know, all the regions that you would expect. But if there's any regions that we missed, or, you know, that we need to add still, that you think we might have missed, there's just so many countries on Earth. I'm sure we might have missed one or two. So if there's anything that you would recommend seeing, adding to that, if you're from one of those countries, definitely do reach out and let us know. It's kind of going to be a community project, I guess. If there's a couple of countries now that are sort of in the process of putting together a data protection authority, which is really good, like Egypt and Mexico. So definitely keep an eye on that as well. There's definitely a lot of important information there, but also it's sort of a project here where we are trying to get community input as well, because, you know, we try and represent every country here, but I'm sure there's things that change, or if there's countries that are establishing data protection authorities, then that's a really positive step for people in those countries as well. So yeah, so that's basically everything that I've got to talk about here. There wasn't any articles this week, so kind of a light week on that side, but yeah. I guess we can hop right into our next story here. So, oh, actually, before we do that, all of this is made possible by our supporters, and you can sign up for a membership or donate at privacyguides.org, or pick up some swag at shop.privacyguides.org. I recently made another purchase on the shop. There's some really cool new merch that we released for the activism section, so definitely check that out. And have a look if you didn't visit it in a while. There's some new stuff on there now. Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy-related information and facilitates a community on our forum and matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. Now, let's talk about how Little Snitch is coming to Linux. So kind of a big announcement from Little Snitch, which has been historically a macOS only app. They've now announced that there is a version available for Linux. So this is kind of reading a little bit from their blog post here, announcing it, I guess press release. Recent political events have pushed governments and organizations to seriously question their dependence on foreign-controlled software. The core issue is simple and uncomfortable. Through automatic updates, a vendor can run any code with any privileges on your machine at any time. Most people know this, but prefer not to think about it. Linux is the obvious candidate for reducing that dependency. No single company controls it. No single country owns it. So I decided to explore it myself. And basically the article goes on to say that this person was trying to find an alternative to Little Snitch. They tried OpenSnitch, which has several command line tools and stuff like that. But basically, it doesn't have the same ability to show which process is making connections, which is basically the way that it works on macOS. Like any process on macOS, you're able to see the connections and block them if you don't want them to be made. As far as I'm aware, OpenSnitch is somewhat a little bit more limited. It kind of only does like application level. I'm not 100% sure because it's been quite a few years since I've used OpenSnitch. And it did seem like it was a bit more complex. So to use, like the interface wasn't particularly easy. So this person at Objective Development has created a Linux version of Little Snitch. Now let's like kind of clear the air on how this works. So basically there's another app on Little Snitch on macOS, but I can't remember what it's called. So there is another app it's called Lulu, and it's by another company. It's a non-profit company. So definitely, yeah, Lulu's the one you're thinking about. But yeah, this one here is Little Snitch has previously been a paid software. So it's actually kind of surprising that this is a free and open source. It's licensed under GPL v2. So it could be quite cool to see package managers just adding this by default, like just adding this as a package. But basically, the way that this works is it is a browser app, kind of. It's like a web app, basically. And the reason why they decided to go with this is that it can work on a server, right? Because this is something that you just run as a system process. For instance, that allows you to access the connections that the server's making through that nice interface. So that's like a benefit of it being in the browser, right? You can access that for a remote computer, which is extremely useful. I'm not really sure of many solutions that do this sort of thing, especially that easily. You just install a package and it's instantly monitoring. But kind of scrolling down here, this is basically based on a kernel component written for eBPF, and that's an open source component, which is available. So just to be clear, the UI is open source and the eBPF filtering component is free and open source, but basically the backend, which manages rules, block lists, and a hierarchical connection view, is free to use, but not open source. So that's basically the reasoning behind that, is because that part is kind of proprietary to Objective Development. They've been working on that for like 20 years to perfect it. So they argue that that should be kept closed. So, and they kind of did an important note here. Unlike the macOS version, Little Snitch for Linux is not a security tool. eBPF provides limited resources, so it's always possible to get around the firewall, for instance, by flooding tables. Its focus is privacy, showing you what's going on and where needed, blocking connections from legitimate software that isn't actively trying to evade it. So, if you install malware, Little Snitch is not going to protect you from the connections getting out, right? And at least right now, there are some limitations. I did see some people were having issues with Fedora Workstation working correctly. They do note that on the page, on the download page. I tested it on Debian 13, and it was working perfectly fine for me. You just install the package, and basically it only works on Linux kernel 6.12 and above. So basically the reasoning behind this is that older kernels currently have an eBPF verifier maximum instruction limit. So they kind of have to backport this fix. Hopefully they can kind of get in contact with the Linux kernel developers and do that. So that is an interesting thing too. But I think this is kind of it's a pretty basic app so far. Like it allows you to enable block lists and see the connections that your computer's making. But I think that's really all you really need at this point. I think just being able to see the connections itself, because a lot of times you'll be using software and you won't realize that it's making connections to like ad servers and stuff like that. And especially if you're using software that is genuine, it's genuine normal software, but it's a proprietary app that, you know, might have some data tracking built in, like Discord or any other of those types of apps. I think this is an important tool to have on Linux, especially because people on Linux still need to be able to see the connections that are being made, and you know, there's still privacy invasive stuff on Linux. You can install Facebook Messenger on Linux, you can install Discord on Linux, you can install Steam. Like all these apps are not great for your privacy, but being able to see some of those connections, I think, is pretty important. But yeah, we kind of got this little poll up on the screen to use Little Snitch. You can type 1, 2, or 3 in chat to respond, and it'll pop up on the screen. But Nate, did you have any thoughts on this one?
No, I think you kind of answered the question I was going to ask, which is, Linux is known for being more private. So my first thought is kind of like, is there a use case for this? Why would people want to use this? And you made a really good point. One of the, this is tangentially related, but a common question is like, how do I get people to switch to XYZ, Signal, Linux, whatever? And one of the things that we are, myself and Jonah and, some of us always say is like, you have a lot more luck by focusing on the features. And so one thing I like to point out, I'm trying to get my sister to switch to Linux because she was on Windows 10 and it's, not getting updates anymore. And I'm going to do that with her next time I see her in person. And one of the things I'm going to try to convince her is, like everything you do on a Windows computer, you can more or less do on Linux, especially for her. If assuming she's not using any special software for her job, you can browse the internet, you can download Discord, you can, a lot of games are now, gaming on Linux is doing really well from what I hear actually. So, for the most part, even some video editing, the Linux computer I use is Cube, so that's a lost cause. But for like Fedora, you can run DaVinci on Fedora, and I think, it's just, point being is like, just because Linux itself is relatively private, but especially once you start adding on a lot of these features that people might use, even at first, like if somebody makes the switch to Linux and at first they start using Microsoft Office, God forbid, or something. I don't even know if that's Linux compatible, but you know what I mean? Like they start off and then after a while, they're just like, yeah, maybe I'll check out LibreOffice or something. And it's just helpful to kind of have that ability to control things. And it may also let you know, like if you fire it up and you're like, oh my God, this thing is pinging like 20 different servers 10 times a day. Like, hold on, let me take a closer look at this thing. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. And I don't know. I think that's really cool that he made this. I don't know. I guess the selfish side of me would like to see this come to something like Windows, even though I know we already have things like Portmaster, Open Wall, Simple Wall. But it's not quite one-to-one. So I think anytime we have more options is always good in my book. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I'm also kind of biased on this because I use their software. Like I use Little Snitch on Mac. I really think it is exceptional software. Like it is, like people say to use Lulu because it's free, but it really does not do the same thing as Little Snitch. Like Little Snitch has a lot of benefits over that. So it's great to see them like kind of expanding, because people have kind of been complaining about Little Snitch. They're like, oh, I wish it was on Windows like you. Like, I wish it was on Linux, different platforms, I think is good. I mean, I'd like to see it be on Windows too, but it may just be, I feel like when we talk about these filtering softwares, it's extremely specific to the platform. Like in this case, it was using eBPF, but on Windows, I'm sure they've got some whole other system, right? So, making that basically, I guess, compatible with Little Snitch is probably a lot of work, and they kind of have to port the entire thing over, which is kind of a pain. But I think it's good to see that Little Snitch is expanding to other platforms, and it's free, which I think was very generous. But
Yeah, I agree. I fully recognize that it's not an easy thing to go from platform to platform. And I mean, even Linux, right? You were saying some people on Fedora are having some issues getting it up and running. And hopefully, since it is open source like that, hopefully people can do what they need to do to get it up and running. But yeah, it's certainly no small task. And I think that is really cool. And actually, yeah, I could never remember because I'm not a Mac user. I could never remember if Little Snitch or Lulu was the one that was free. And I didn't realize Little Snitch was the paid one. And I think that's really cool that this is free. So bummer that it's
Yeah.
not fully open source, but I understand the logic of like, I've been doing this for years and I don't want somebody to 20 years, more than 20 years. And the algorithms and concepts are something we'd like to keep closed for the time being. Like, I get it. So
Yeah, I think also here, let's quickly cover this question we got from Cass K. So they asked, any tips you guys have for people who want to start making YouTube content related to privacy? All right, Nate, what do you got here?
yeah, so I just want to mention that I have my own website called The New Oil, which is it's supposed to be like a very, very, very beginner level to privacy stuff. And my hope that is that when people finish reading that, they'll move on to other resources like privacy guides. But over there, I do actually have a quick start guide on the front page for content creators. And the reason I'm referring you over there is because there is a lot of different stuff there, but it kind of goes over things like it's really, I mean, as with everything in privacy, right? It's like what do you want? What are your priorities and stuff? So, for example, if you're going to be a Twitch streamer, you could totally just use your handle, right? I mean, like Markiplier. That dude's obviously not his real name. It's derived from his real name, I think. But a lot of YouTubers and stuff, like, they're known by their handles. But then if you're going to be like a public figure, like a politician, a lot of them go by nicknames. Like Ted Cruz, his first name is Raphael. So, things like that. It's just to keep in mind, what are you going for will determine a lot of those things. But I'm a big fan of things like using pseudonyms wherever possible. So, like, again, handles, fake names, being mindful of your online presence. You don't have to plant your flag on every single website, but it may not hurt. And sometimes you may not need certain websites. Like, I remember way, way back in the day, there's a band I follow, Oh Sleeper, actually. They only ever had a Twitter account. They never signed up for Facebook. They never signed up for Instagram. Like, you could only follow them on Twitter, which was slightly annoying as someone who didn't use Twitter at the time, but like, that's what they wanted to stick to. And again, likewise, most bands probably don't need Twitch unless they're going to do live streaming nowadays. And maybe a lot of Twitch streamers don't need Twitter. So just kind of asking those questions. But also, a lot of the technical tools that we recommend at privacy guides as well, things like email aliasing, password managers, basically securing your online account. Because I've seen bands, their Facebook gets hacked and all of a sudden they're spamming out like 20% off Ray-Bans or whatever at this sketchy link. And again, we just talked about this earlier. Facebook does not care. Unless you're Taylor Swift, they don't care. Sucks to suck, scrub. We're not going to help you get your account back. So I actually read an article earlier today about how Discord's support system is still the dumbest thing that has ever been designed by a human being. I'm not sure a human being designed it. It's so dumb. But anyways, yeah. So like, just I don't know. I think I would check that out and definitely bounce any of my recommendations off privacy guides. Cause I will admit privacy guides has much stricter, I don't want to say vetting process, criteria for a lot of their recommendations. So, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, just I would check both of those out. I think they're really good resources that'll get you started, hopefully. So
Yeah, I just want to add as well, I think there's some parts that kind of go. I haven't read your streamer guide, so maybe I'm just repeating what's already on the page. But I think stuff that's kind of important to establish early on. Are you going to show your face? I mean, that is kind of important, right? I think you can kind of see what I'm doing here. Like, I don't really want to show my face. I'm sure someone could find what I look like, but it's just a layer of privacy on that aspect. People aren't going to recognize you in the street or whatever, or people aren't going to be able to immediately know who you are. So that is a benefit too. And I think also thinking about things that you share, being very mindful of things that you share, because you take a picture of the room that you're in, someone could analyze the texture of the roof or something, find rental property stuff and analyze and work out where you're living or something like that. People are pretty creepy. So I think being aware of, what you're sharing, how it can be used to find you, being very deliberate about posting stuff. But I think it's definitely a personal preference whether you want to show your face or even show anything about you. You can certainly be faceless. There's plenty of channels that do that, and pretty successfully, I'd say. So, I think it's definitely worth thinking about at least. But I hope those tips were somewhat helpful. Yeah, we try and answer people's questions in the chat. There was another question here from Plants McGee, which I'm not really sure about what it means. So what's the deal with Twitter, Sydney? They just left. So what is this referring to exactly?
They're referring to the EFF just left Twitter. Real quick, I do want to say I didn't mention the face thing, and I really should add that because that's a really good point. I've been just watching random YouTube videos lately about like dinosaurs and space, and because I will forever be 5 years old at heart. And yeah, a lot of those. So it's not just a privacy thing. A lot of those channels are faceless too. And I'm actually sitting here thinking, I'm like, man, maybe I should do more faceless videos because I bet they can pump those out real quick. But yeah, going back to the question, the EFF left Twitter. I have personal opinions, but all I'm going to say is go check their blog post. They laid it out in very plain numbers where basically they said, and you can tell I agree with their decision, but basically they said that they're not reaching people and they only have so many resources and they've decided their resources are better spent elsewhere. So you can disagree with them. That's fine. Free country for now. You're welcome to do that, but that's their logic. So yeah,
I think I'm just going to share my thoughts on this. Obviously, these are my thoughts, not related to Privacy Guides as an organization, but I think the platform itself has kind of become pretty toxic. I think a lot of people are complaining about it kind of becoming a bit of an echo chamber for like conservative voices and stuff. I think that's not great. It's definitely, the platform's definitely changed and in a lot of ways became worse. I think we're seeing more and more people leaving because, it is kind of a platform that allows, in a lot of countries, I would say hate speech. Maybe not in the US because the laws there are a little bit looser, but yeah, I can kind of understand not wanting to be on a platform like that. And I think, in our case, Privacy Guides is still on Twitter posting stuff. I think we are getting some traction. So maybe our strategy is different to that of the EFF, but we're still getting quite a lot of traction with that. I think it's important to reach people no matter what platform they're on. So, in a lot of cases, we're going to be on all these crappy platforms. Doesn't mean we support the platform or we want to, doesn't mean we want to, make people move to better platforms like Mastodon, right? Like we recommend different ones that people should move to instead. But I think you have to kind of you have to meet people where they are. And if we just stopped posting on all these platforms, we wouldn't be reaching as many people and, converting them to believing different things, like that X is a bad platform and invades your privacy. Same thing Jonas said here, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me to leave X, but not Facebook or TikTok, but shrugging emoji. I think it's definitely like a personal choice. If their analytics said that they weren't, I mean, it doesn't really make that much sense in my opinion, because we have all these multi-posting tools. Like, for instance, our team here, Nate, me, and Jonah, a lot of our posting is through Buffer. And all it is just ticking another box to send it to another platform. Like, we're not specifically creating anything for a specific platform. So, I mean, if those, we can debate all day, like how bad X is as a platform. We can debate all day how bad Facebook is and TikTok, but I still think, we post on all those platforms because we want to be able to reach these people, because everyone deserves privacy, not just everyone on Mastodon. And especially because these people are probably less aware of the issue. That's why they're on those platforms in the first place. So I can kind of understand from like an ideological perspective, like if you really don't like being on a platform that kind of amplifies conservative voices, I can kind of understand why you may not want to be on a platform like that where you get harassed. But I think from an organizational perspective, I think I'm not quite sure if I agree with this because it is kind of easy to cross post, and I can respect the decision, but I'm not sure if I agree with it particularly. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
Okay. I don't really have much to add. I think that was a good point about buffer, but I don't know. I don't have a, what do they say? I don't have a dog in this fight. So it's kind of a messed up saying now that I think about it. Don't fight dogs. Um, on that note, I think we're going to move into a story about the FBI extracting a suspect's deleted signal messages saved in the iPhone notification database. So I'm not going to scroll on this one too much because this is actually a paid post. But this comes from 404 Media. Highly recommend. It's totally worth it, in my opinion. They do great reporting. But Jonah did say in the chat that you felt like this is a little bit of a nothing burger here. And I halfway agree. Because it's the headline kind of says it all, but I think it's worth talking about because it kind of points out, they said further down in the article that this just kind of amplifies how difficult it can be. Actually, let me see if I can find it here. But they basically said it just points out how difficult it can be to think about every possible angle of your OPSEC. Especially when it really matters this much, So like last year in June, we found out that which, I mean, the more technical people who know this kind of stuff, which, remember, not everybody is super technical, but we found out last year that because push notifications are usually not encrypted, Apple and Google can see them, which probably was not a shocker to most people, but also basically the way that they're registered to make sure they get to the right device and stuff. It's basically it's another way that police can get your data, right? Police can go to Apple and Google and they can subpoena you for your data. And so we're really big fans of places like, or services like Tuda, for example, does not rely on Google for push notifications on Android. Signal, I think, also has their own implementation. Proton does rely on Google, but they encrypt it. So there's not really anything useful there, although there is still metadata, which is worth noting. But now we're learning it's still even more complicated than that, right? Because basically what happened is they arrested somebody and they were able to, they ran the Celebrite or whatever, whichever device it was. They ran the forensic tools on the person's phone, which was an iPhone in this case. And this person had already deleted Signal. I believe they even had disappearing messages enabled, but don't quote me on that. I feel like I read that in this post somewhere. And the police were still able to extract some of the messages because the notification history was stored on the device. And yeah, I did not see that coming personally. So it is worth noting that because these are device notifications, that we only got, or they only got, I should say, half the I can't word today and I apologize. They only got half of the conversation, right? They got the incoming stuff. They did not get everything, of course. And I personally am a little bit unclear on exactly how this would work. Like, for example, how long do these notifications stay there? It sounds like this is a volatile memory kind of thing, like RAM. So would rebooting the phone get rid of them? I'm assuming not, because I think if these people were smart enough to use Signal and disappearing messages and to delete Signal, then they probably rebooted their phone as well. Or maybe not, since they were able to forensically examine the phone. I really can't say for sure. But I just personally, I have some technical questions like that. But I think the big reminder here that I thought was interesting, I wanted to talk about, was just the reminder to be mindful of your notifications. One thing I really appreciate about Signal, and I know other other apps do this too to various extents. Privacy apps tend to be a lot better about this, of course, as opposed to something like Discord. But Signal lets you get pretty granular in terms of, like, I can mute this chat. I can mute this chat for an hour. I can mute it for a day. I can mute it indefinitely. I can select notifications. It says here that includes name, content, name only, or no name in content. And so this is actually what I used to do ever since I found out about that story from last year. I have Signal set to send me just a notification that says Signal. And then from there, I use notification profiles to kind of manage things. So like when I was at work in my last job, which was a more traditional 9-to-5 sort of job, I, in the sense of, like, I can't be on my phone during the day and stuff like that. I had a notification profile that would start at working hours, end at end of day, which was never really end of day. But at that point, I'm like, whatever, we're staying late. I don't care. And during that time, pretty much the only notification that would come through would be my wife in case there was an emergency. And so at that point, I don't need the notification content, right? Because I know exactly who it is. It's the only person that the notification will get through. And likewise, when I go to sleep, my wife in case I'm traveling, and my sister in case of emergency. And I think that's it. No, I have one local friend too in case of emergency. And those are the only people, even though I tried lately, I've been doing a good job. But usually I try not to sleep with the phone in the bedroom. But you know what I mean? It's like, I'm able to craft these very specific notification profiles. And even now here at Privacy Guides, I do have working hours where I'm like at work and I try to focus. So I've got everything that isn't, again, like my wife and my sister, and then all the Privacy Guides people. They're the only ones that the notifications go through so that I don't get distracted by other people. And I think trying to figure out how to make a device work for you in that sense, I think it was in the Privacy Guides forum when people were talking about this story, or it may have been in the comments of this actual article, but somebody mentioned like changing the ringtones. Before I started using these notification profiles, that was something I did. Is my wife had a different ringtone than everyone else, so that if I got a notification, I would know, is it her? Do I need to check this, or can I just ignore it? And so, yeah, it's definitely something to be mindful of. And something else that kind of came up here. I'm looking at the comments now on this is on iPhones. If the calls show in recent, that will show up in like the actual phone app log. There's on both iPhone and Android, there's always relay calls, so your IP address isn't exposed. Slight quality trade-off, but if you're a high-risk person or if you live in an area where you've always got a good signal, it's probably not a big deal. So just things like that to keep in mind. But one last thing I do want to circle back to when Jonah said, he's like, this is kind of a nothing burger because Signal doesn't encrypt their own local database in the first place. And I think that's a valid point. I mean, I love Signal. I recommend Signal. It's very user-friendly. It's very easy. It's cross-platform. It's got all kinds of shiny little features that people enjoy and makes them more likely to use it. But I think it is important to note that there is no perfect tool, whether that's Signal, whether that's SimpleX, whether that's, whatever messenger, whether that's email. Email itself is incredibly imperfect, which we did explicitly mention that in our latest video about email. So, it's looking at your threat model, it's looking at what you need from a tool, and it's understanding what the limitations are and how to either eliminate them, mitigate them, work around them. Because then I'm not gonna lie, my one of my thoughts I had today when I was thinking about this story is like, I can't control other people's phones. I have my notifications set not to do things, but now when I text people, my notifications are on that device, and that's just something to be mindful of. So yeah. Kind of a shorter story, I think, today, but it's a pretty quick takeaway. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that one that you wanted to share, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up some great points there. Like, there's ways to at least somewhat protect this on your end. Like you said, there's settings in Signal itself. I almost wonder though, you could almost disable notifications just in general, no notifications. And then, there wouldn't be a database where anything would be stored in this case. But, maybe that's kind of problematic for people to do. But there's also the case where, there's, at least on Android, there is the ability to enable notification history. So it can save notifications. That's off by default, but it's another thing to check. To see if you have that enabled. Definitely disable that. I don't think that's necessary to enable. Like it's the whole point of notifications is they're kind of ephemeral. They're there on the screen. I kind of assumed though that when you dismiss the notification, it's gone, right? I didn't think that there would be saved on your device in a database. So this might be something for Apple to actually fix because I feel like that is a bit of a concern. And Anonymous344 just put in the chat, threat model, threat model, threat model. Exactly. Like if your concern is your device being seized and you want to protect the data on it, use Molly, have an encrypted database in Signal. Don't use notifications because they can be accessed, right? I think it's kind of hard though, especially because in this story in particular, I think they said the case was the first time authorities charged people for alleged Antifa activities after President Trump designated the umbrella term a terrorist organization. So I don't know, this is kind of a very nebulous thing going on in the US. Like what is Antifa? Like it's not really an organization. It's kind of a bit silly that they're calling it that. But I think people should be, I guess, more vigilant than usual, because, you never know if your activities are going to be considered Antifa, and then your devices might be seized. So it could be worth thinking if, you might be a target of this sort of thing a little bit more thoroughly, because it does seem like the government is cracking down on political behavior. I can't really read the full article here, so I'm not really sure. It says here that it was people present. It said the case involved a group of people setting off fireworks and vandalizing property at a ICE detention facility. So
yeah, in Texas, and one person shooting a police officer in the neck. So I'm not going to comment on whether they were guilty or not, but that's what the FBI
I think that's
is
up to the courts to decide. But I think the thing is, right, if you're doing any sort of political action, I'm not saying, you should go out and vandalize an ICE facility, but, I'm saying like any sort of political action, whether that's peaceful protest or, marching through the streets, I think it's important to think about ways that your data could be extracted and used against you. I think in this case, it's definitely, everyone deserves privacy, even if these people were vandalizing something. So it's kind of unfortunate that the iPhone was kind of a bit vulnerable to this extraction method. I also do wonder if lockdown mode could have prevented this, because I think lockdown mode does prevent a lot of these like tools that these FBI uses to, like, forensic extraction tools. I think it probably could have been interesting to hear if that was the case or not. I'm going to assume no, but I feel like anyone who's going to any political action, like, just enable lockdown mode. It's like the least you can do. It's a basic thing. It's just a switch you turn on. But I do think it is calling out Antifa is big, the hacker known as 4chan energy. Yeah, it's just like it just shows that the government doesn't really know about, like, any sort of political organizations. I think it's a lot easier to lump a whole bunch of people together and sort of say this nebulous thing is bad, than having any sort of specifics. Like, yeah, these protesters at this specific ICE facility, who, that's why, I mean, we don't really know if they're part of a group or anything, but they could have just been acting independently. I think it's kind of ridiculous that we're grouping it all together like that. But yeah, don't really have more to add than that.
Yeah. The only thing I wanted to comment on is you said that it would be best to turn off notifications altogether, which, yeah, I mean, if it's really, it's all about threat model, right? Like, that wouldn't be feasible for me in my day-to-day for sure. But yeah, especially if you're doing something sensitive, whether that's simply protesting or whether you're taking it further, which I'm not advocating for violence or breaking any laws, but I'm just saying, threat model. Yeah, you maybe should bring a separate device. You maybe should turn off notifications. It's tricky, but it's also just, yeah, I don't know. I personally just wonder how well known this kind of vulnerability is. Like, is this the kind of thing that technical people would look at and be like, yeah, obviously iPhones are keeping because it sounded like, Jonah, full disclosure, Jonah's the person I usually go to with deep technical questions because he's really smart about this kind of stuff. And when I was asking him questions about this earlier this week, I was like, and I asked him those questions about, like, would the phone restart? Would this, that, and the other, or excuse me, would a restart clear out the cache or the database? And he didn't really know either. And he said the same thing that you said, where he's like, I always thought that when you swiped a notification, it was gone. Is this like, do you have to handle it differently somehow? And so where I'm going with that is, like, he's really smart, in my opinion, not to, like, but and if he doesn't even know this stuff, it's like, how many people do know this? Like, this is not common knowledge. And I think we did find some court cases. I mean, this was like a real quick web search. We're not lawyers, obviously, but we did find some cases where the judge kind of threw out certain evidence because they're like, how would a person be expected to even know that they were leaving evidence? Which and I mean, that's not exactly what his argument was, but it's like there's a certain level of just like it's insane that you found this, and I'm not going to allow this in court. And I kind of wonder how this would qualify as well. How well known is this kind of a thing? And yeah, super crazy. But
I think this also brings up like the other concern with iOS, right? Because iOS is a closed system, right? We don't have access to the source code. We don't know that there's a database storing people's notifications. Like we're up to iOS 26 now. Like there's been 26 versions of, well, not 26, but I guess 19
not quite.
updates. 19 updates. And we still haven't like seen this be an issue before. So I think that's the benefit of open source operating systems. Like, Graphene OS, we know there's no notification database. We know that those messages aren't being stored after they're being dismissed. Whereas with iOS, it's sort of a black box. We can protect as much as we can from this sort of thing. Like we can make assumptions that things are done a certain way, but I feel like making assumptions is kind of risky because we don't have clear evidence with what these systems actually do. So I think that's where open source operating systems are going to definitely beat out this sort of thing. Jonah says, was about to type what Jordan is saying. Yeah, so I guess we kind of had the same thought on this, but I think it's definitely, I think one thing to think about as well is, there's certain apps that need notifications and there's certain apps that don't. Like we can definitely try and reduce the amount of stuff sending notifications, because as far as I'm aware, on like Google and Apple devices, there's stuff that's sent, like the way that notifications work is it's sent through, Google Firebase, or it's sent through Apple servers. And we've already had a story previously where, someone's notifications were able to be subpoenaed from Apple and Google and, get access to the notification content. And there's possibly sensitive information there. We did end up finding out, though, that in a lot of cases, a lot of these apps that are privacy focused, they actually encrypt the notification content. So Apple and Google will get notified when that notification is arriving. They won't have any insight into what it actually is. So, I think notifications are kind of one of those sort of, they have a lot of like foot guns, I guess. They kind of are like a bit of a dangerous thing that we need to consider. I think bringing this story up is like, brought this to the forefront again. I think obviously there's people that need to disable notifications, but I think it's good to at least consider this as a threat, because I guess people haven't really been doing that.
yeah, and not to speculate too much, because you literally just said like, all we can do is speculate sometimes. But I wonder if, because you pointed out, it's like there's been so many versions of iPhone, and we're just now learning this. And part of me just wonders, has it always, and this is just me thinking out loud, obviously I know none of us have answers to this, but like, has it always been doing this, or is this a new feature? Because my thought process is, if it's always been doing this, I think that kind of highlights the arms race nature of privacy and security, where before it was like, I don't know, just to pull random examples out of thin air that may not fit because I'm making this up as I go along, but like, before the police would walk by a building, look in the window and go, oh, there's my evidence. And now they have to like go deep into the building, into the bank vault, and like, so it just kind of makes me wonder, like, is this some new thing? Or is they've just never used it before because they've never needed to try so hard to find evidence before, which would, if that is true, then that would just show how much more secure everything is getting. But again, we don't know. We'll never know, probably. So just a random thought that I had. So I think that's all I've got on that story, personally.
Alrighty then. I guess that's kind of a little bit of time now to move into the forum updates this week. So in a minute, we'll start taking viewer questions. So if you've been holding on to any questions about any of the stories we've talked about so far, go ahead and start leaving them on our forum thread or in the chat on the live stream. And just so you know, if you're watching this and you don't have an account on one of those platforms, we do stream on StreamYard. So check out the forum post and there's a link there. You can join without an email, just a name, and you can ask a question. But for now, let's stick to our community forum. And there's always a lot of activity there, but here's a few of this week's most interesting discussions happening there. So there was this thread that Nate linked here, and this one is about Wisconsin. So Wisconsinites can keep watching porn after governor vetoes age verification bill. So I guess I'm going to kind of throw this to you, Nate, because I feel like you have quite a lot of thoughts on this one.
Yeah. So I originally thought this was good news, not just from the porn angle. I think that's just 404 being clickbaity, which I say that with love. I mean, to me, it's only clickbait if you don't deliver on the promise. And, it's everybody's trying to stand out, right? But anyways, yeah, so we've been... privacy is an uphill battle. I think we all know that. And I think that it can be really depressing because I think if we're being honest, we generally tend to lose more than we win, which I don't think it's a lost cause. I think, especially as things get worse, people are going to start realizing the value of their privacy, and hopefully we can start to reverse that trend a little bit. But, a lot of the time we do take some pretty severe losses. And so it's important to celebrate the wins, which I'll get to why this is a bit of a mixed bag in a minute. But for now, I do want to celebrate the good sides, which is that the governor rejected this. This was an age verification bill, Assembly Bill 105, which would have forced sites with more than 1/3 of material harmful to minors, defined as depictions of actual or simulated sexual acts or body parts, including blah, 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 blah. Female nipples, not male nipples, as always, but whatever. That's a rant for a different time. Anyways, it would have required using any commercially reasonable method that uses public or private transactional data gathered about the individual. And the article says this means uploading an ID, showing their face for a biometric scan, uploading credit card information, or a combination of these. And the governor vetoed this bill and said, I am vetoing this bill in its entirety because I object to this bill's intrusion into the personal privacy of Wisconsin residents. While I agree that we should protect children from harmful material, this bill imposes an intrusive burden on adults who are trying to access constitutionally protected materials. Evers wrote that the bill doesn't prevent platforms from giving collected personal data to third parties, such as the government or data brokers, and he wrote this is a violation of personal privacy. Additionally, I'm concerned about data security and the potential for misuse of personally identifiable information that could be intercepted by or transmitted to a third party, used for the basis of blackmail or identity theft. Although the bill includes penalties for a business entity who violates the prohibition of retention of personal data, those penalties cannot undo the harm. So all really, really good stuff. That I was super stoked to see. Unfortunately, I think here in the comment section is kind of where it went wrong. Is some people pointed out, and I don't know if I missed this in the original article because I'm still not seeing it here either. Maybe it's in a different statement that he gave, or the rest of the statement. But some people quoted that the governor wants device level age verification. And apparently this is a quote from him. We can and should work to prevent minors from accessing adult content, but there are better solutions than the one offered by this bill. For example, we can work with tech companies to implement device-based age verification that takes place on a user's phone or computer, which can be more secure and effective method. Other states have been moving toward device-based solutions, and major tech companies are adopting these options as well. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get into the age verification debate because I still am fresh from there was a 3 or 4 week run where we talked about it every single week. And I still don't feel like we have anything new to add to that, or at least I certainly don't. You can feel free to chime in if you have more to add to that. But I don't know. I have mixed feelings about device-based stuff, but I certainly see the drawback. And anyways, I guess this one's a mixed bag, but I want to celebrate the win that he did repeal it. And I certainly agree that this would have been way worse than device-based. I definitely know the problems with device-based. I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, but there's a difference between getting a paper cut and getting your finger chopped off. And I think this would have been getting your finger chopped off. So I think that's good that we avoided a much worse fate. I hope he doesn't go for the device-based stuff. That's kind of the drawback, but yeah, anyways, I'm going in circles now. I just wanted to celebrate a small, even if it's a mixed bag, we did have a small win this week that I thought was pretty cool. So
yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, one thing that it kind of bounces off the issue that we talked about in the highlight story is, I think we should be against all these sort of centralized things, right? This is centralization. Again, we talked about app stores, right? 3 app stores, or I guess really two. There's like two big ones, Google Play and Apple's App Store, right? And I think this is just like sort of reinforcing why these platforms are bad. Like we talked about at the start, like having these platforms decide what is allowed, what is not allowed. This is just a bad idea. This bill in particular, it sounds to most people, I think it would sound reasonable. But the issue is where, you know, there's more, there's things where like, you know, what's classified as adult content? Like that's the stuff that they mentioned sounded reasonable, I guess, if you're, I mean, I guess. But, you know, there's all sorts of issues when it starts covering more stuff that isn't technically adult content, that's restricting people from accessing those applications unless they verify their identity. So I don't know. This is definitely sort of, I guess it's somewhat of a win. It's not like a the bill got taken down, I guess, but there's still the chance that device-based age verification might make its way through, like we've been seeing with the App Store transparency stuff. I think that would definitely be probably in a lot of cases worse because, you know, doing this on a device level is a lot more invasive and it gives a lot more control to these tech companies. So I'm certainly against both. I think, I can't believe I keep having to say this, but like, you know, we have parental controls, like we have all these amazing tools that people have access to. I don't think the government needs to get involved on people's devices so much, right? Maybe people have different opinions. There's a way to do this privately. I just think there's always leaks, right? Like this article in particular, actually, it mentions, like if you scroll down, there's a section in there where they talk about the Discord age verification stuff where people that were having to send their ID data and selfies was breached in a security breach, right? Like, even though we think a lot of these services are done properly, the age verification systems, a lot of times security is just not the priority. So that's sort of my thoughts on this story, I guess.
And even if they were, just to add on to that last part you said, like this week alone, I've covered like 3 or 4 stories about insider threats and people abusing their access to a system to get into. I covered one, I need to add these to my website actually. I covered one about a police officer who was using DMV photos to make AI nudes of women, not even making that up. And then I found another one. I wasn't even looking for this one. This one didn't even come across my newsfeed. I was web searching for something else and it magically showed up in the search results. There was a dude at Facebook who was giving himself access to over 30,000 private photos. So yeah, even if these systems are made correctly, quote unquote correctly, I'm not going to count Facebook as correctly because they've had more data breaches than there are grains of sand on Earth. But, you know, even if these things are made correctly, there's still insider threats. And it's just, yeah, I think I'm kind of coming around to you because there's so many ways to solve a problem, right? And there's the technical solutions, there's legal solutions, but then there's like educational solutions, which I think is kind of like where things like privacy guides come in this podcast and stuff. And I think from what I'm seeing, I think this is probably largely an educational problem because I feel like I mentioned the example of, again, my sister didn't even know that iPhones have parental controls. And granted, her kid is really young. She doesn't have to worry about that yet. He doesn't have his own phone or tablet or anything. So she's not at that point where she has to worry about it. But like, how many parents know these things exist? How many parents know what they're capable of? I've heard, I never used them because I don't have kids. I've heard that some of these parental controls are actually really good. But how many of them, you know, just don't know they're there, or they'll pay for some garbage third-party thing that's going to be selling their kids' data, cough, cough, Life 360. Because, you know, again, like, especially my generation, we came up in an era where, like, Windows security was garbage. Nobody trusted Windows Firewall. Of course you had to pay for a third-party antivirus, and that's just not true anymore. And I wonder how many people even know that. So, yeah, I am kind of starting to lean more towards the side of, like, I think this is largely or at very least, we need to start with the educational aspect. And then if we get everybody up to speed and find out that there's cracks, then maybe we start talking about how do we fix this. But yeah, this definitely feels like an oversimplified. I mean, I've known that from the start, but yeah, age verification is just an overly simple solution. So
I think I want to add a little bit extra onto what you're saying there about like
sure.
how we should like, you know, teach adults about these features. We have gotten to a point, right, where it is like I almost feel like people don't have an excuse, because if you buy a new Google device, if you buy a new Apple device, if you buy a new Windows device, in the setup process, it literally asks you, is this device for a child? Like it is kind of like I feel like we've gotten to a point, right, where like maybe the device has to come with a red sheet of paper or something that says, if this device is for a child, please set it up during the setup process. Like, how much more obvious can we get? Like, you know what I mean? But
Actually, I do want to push back on that a little bit, because it doesn't do that here in the US. But I think that would be a good idea if it did that in the US, because I don't see any reason it shouldn't. No.
It doesn't
Or at
ask
least
like in the setup
I haven't
process?
seen a single one in the US. And I mean, granted, it's been a while since I've set up anything that wasn't. No, even because the most recent device. Well, I mean, okay, this computer is a company computer, so it was already set up when I got it. My Windows computer I got in 2022-ish. When did I get my iPhone? I don't know, but they're all within the last 5 years for sure, and not a single one of them has done it to me.
Okay.
I don't know. I
Well,
don't think I know anybody who's set up a device from scratch. I think most people I know just like transfer their Apple ID or their Google account or whatever. So I don't know. I could try to do some digging and look into it. But yeah, I've never had a device ask me that ever here in the US. But like I said, I don't think that would be a bad idea, because yeah, how cool would that be if, my sister goes out and buys her kid his first iPhone and it says, is this device for a child? And she goes, why, yes, it is. And then it just walks her through the parental controls. So yeah, I think that'd be
I mean,
cool.
I can only comment on like I don't have particularly new devices. Like I have an older phone, right? I reset it recently, and through the setup process, at least on iOS 18, it did ask. Um, it said during the setup process, like, is this device for a child? Same with this Android phone on the Google operating system, and same with Windows. Actually, I installed Windows recently, and they did ask. But it does say on Apple's website. I did look into this before because I was having this conversation with someone. Like it does offer this uh, this section. It does say on their website, this is a before you can set parental controls on a child's device. So it doesn't say specifically on here. I mean, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it would be different in the US, but I guess you can trial and error this. But it does say, I'm seeing articles here where it says it is implementing new features when you set up a device. So I'm not sure. Maybe we'll have to look more into how that affects things globally, because I know in Australia we do have like age verification laws and stuff. So it could be applied differently here, but I do think companies are making things incredibly easy now to do this. And that's why I kind of get a bit frustrated when there's government officials who are pushing for these really aggressive methods to do this, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like generally it's not up to the government to decide this sort of stuff. Like, it should be up to like a parenting decision from the parents. Like, if they want to have a child using an adult device, they can. But yeah, I definitely think the process, at least even if it doesn't display it on setting up a device, I think it's good that the integration is already there, right? Like the options are there. Maybe we could do a better job showing people that this isn't even an option. But I feel like I don't know, maybe Joda can comment on like a US perspective on this, but every device I've set up so far has asked me if it's a child's one. So I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I need to go reset my iPhone and see what happens. But no, and I agree with you. That's what I'm saying, is like I've heard the parental controls are really good. It's just, at least here in the US, I feel like it's an issue of how do we let people know those are out there. Like, I didn't even know Windows had parental controls, to be totally honest with you. But I don't know. I've just maybe that's something that's only rolled out in the past couple years, and I like just barely missed it. So I don't know, but I certainly would not be opposed to it. To like, yeah, these controls are already built in. Say that this device is for a child, and we'll walk you through how to set them up and how to use them. I think that would be awesome. So
Yeah, I've definitely seen it on Windows. Can't recall on Android and iOS. So it does, I think it might have been because you might have got the laptop as a Windows 10 laptop and then you upgraded it to Windows 11. It might have bypassed the screen.
That could be it, yeah. Because wait, was this one? I'm not sure, actually.
I think it was more a Windows 11 feature. So it could have been before they fully released it all. But the way it works on Windows is quite good as well. It works really well on iOS and Google as well. I think I can't really think. Mac, yeah, Mac has it too. So all the major platforms do have it. So, I kind of become a little bit frustrated when we're trying to push these aggressive laws. I've seen it for Apple Watches, says Jonah. Yeah, I've seen it too. Quite good if you use their online accounts, as far as I know. Yeah, this is kind of a drawback, right? I don't think Graphene OS has parental controls built in. Don't think that's really a priority for them. And definitely not Linux. So, that is kind of an issue with these more open platforms. They tend to not include these sort of features. So, yeah, it's definitely a good discussion to have though.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for it next time I buy a new device now, because now I'm really curious. I think that would be great if it was a default prompt for sure. So, on that note, I think that's all I had on that forum thread. So I think it's time to head over to some viewer questions. So we'll start with questions on our forum from paying members. If you are interested in becoming a member, you can go to privacyguides.org and click the red heart icon in the top right corner of the page. But we only had one question this week on our initial on our forum post about this topic. And this is from expert 4870, who says, what are the privacy implications of using an alternative front end that fetches content directly from the original service rather than proxying it? You say something invidious instances do. So it will be while using a popular VPN. How does that compare to just using the original website with a content blocker like uBlock Origin? My experience has been that browser fingerprinting techniques can still track users easily, even with content blockers enabled. So I'm wondering whether non-proxying front ends offer different protections. I'll be honest, I'm not super familiar with the technical aspects of front ends, so I'm not sure which ones proxy and which ones don't.
I can talk about it if you want.
I'll let you go first then, because you probably know more about this than I do.
Yeah, so basically there's, I guess let's talk about the main two ones here that we're talking about piped and invidious, at least the web-based ones. So by default, as far as I'm aware, it depends on the instance, right? Because these are decentralized services, so it depends on what the instance is configured. So the piped uses a piped proxy. So it's actually your requests to YouTube are going through the server that you're connecting to for the website. It's basically they're proxying the requests on your behalf. And the issue with this sort of method, right, is it's a lot easier to be blocked, right? Because if there's 10,000 people accessing a piped instance, YouTube's gonna block that. They're gonna think you're a bot, you're spamming. So that's the issue that we kind of have with piped. They're kind of getting blocked a lot, and the access is not as good. Invidious in this instance, it actually plays. Basically, what it does is it strips out all the ad and tracking technology from the YouTube website, and it will actually play the video directly from Google. So you're still making a connection to Google itself. Again, though, there's a setting in the settings called proxy videos, and that will proxy it through the invidious instance. But by default, it should play it directly from Google. So the reason this is kind of also becoming a problem is because a lot of VPN servers are getting restricted, and they require you to sign in to play videos. So yeah, there's more restrictions being made. So with Invidious, you can actually check this yourself, right? You can use uBlock Origin and you can see the connections that the website is making. You'll see it's connecting to Google Video. So your IP address is visible to YouTube itself, right? But there's significantly less tracking happening because the JavaScript on YouTube's website isn't actually loading. which is the usual concern, right? So YouTube will know that your IP address is pulling a video from their servers, but yeah, then we can also talk about like FreeTube, and that does give you the option when you're setting it up if you want to do fully local playback. So the same thing as Invidious, pulling the video directly from Google, or you can also use a piped proxy, which, like we talked about, it can have issues, but it does offer more privacy because your IP address isn't being directly exposed to Google itself. So another thing here is using a VPN and then using Invidious or like a locally fetching these videos. It's going to be a lot less easy to track it because you're using an IP address that a bunch of other users have. So I think that's basically kind of the rundown. I wouldn't use Invidious if you are on like a residential connection because it'll just be linked to your IP address. They'll just see your residential IP address accessing all the videos. It'll be easier for them to track it. So I'd say try using a VPN and try using Invidious and directly fetching the videos over piped, because piped is usually blocked a lot more commonly. So hopefully that answers the privacy question about this topic. It's kind of confusing, but if I didn't answer it well, just let me know.
Cool. Thank you. I think it's also just one thing I want to throw out is we don't really know much about browser fingerprinting. Like I made like a year ago, I made a video about that over on my YouTube. And the thing I learned is that a lot of it, I mean, there's like two categories. There's the people who are like marketing companies who are like, yeah, we can fingerprint anybody anywhere. And it's like, okay, and I'm going to take you with a grain of salt because you'll say anything to make a sale. And then there's the technical people who are just like, literally everything can be fingerprinted, and like the privacy people who say this. And I think the issue is we don't actually know for sure how prevalent it is, which techniques they're actually using. Cause yeah, I've seen all kinds of proofs of concept about like CSS can be fingerprinted if you do it right. A lot of extensions can be fingerprinted. Like there's so many different ways to do it, but we don't know for sure what ways they're doing and what ways they're using. So I'm not saying not to worry about it. I just want to point that out. It's really, it's not like uBlock Origin does nothing. I know it does block a lot of stuff. And then, Brave obviously has a lot of built-in protections. Firefox, especially with the setting changes that we recommend, offers really good protection. It's obviously not perfect. If you need perfection or as close to perfection as you can get, you need something like Tor and Whonix, but at that point, you're probably not streaming YouTube. So just something to keep in mind. There's still definitely a place for those. So,
I mean, I think we do have some research that has been done specifically on browser fingerprinting. Like when I was looking into, like we also did a video here at Privacy Guides, we interviewed someone about it as well. There are at least some hard facts about it. So, I mean, definitely go maybe check out that video. We did talk a little bit with, we got information from someone at the Tor project who works on a lot of the fingerprinting stuff for that. So definitely look at that. I think there's definitely papers that have been done. When I was researching for that video, there was quite a lot of papers about specifically talking about stuff like entropy and, how that affects the fingerprint, I guess. I think Nate's right though. There's like, we don't really have the specifics of what companies are doing because it's kind of hard to know, right? But I think going off the research that we do have, increasing entropy, like with Tor browser, I think there's basically proof at this point that if you use Tor browser, if you take all the precautions as possible, you're not going to be able to identify someone specifically with their fingerprint if they're using something like Tor browser. But I think we have gotten to a point where so many tools just have all this built in, like Firefox and Brave both have fingerprint protection built in by default now. So it's like, basically, we're getting to a point where these protections are becoming pretty mainstream. But I think if you need something a bit more extreme, then something like Molvad or Tor is definitely going to offer better protection.
Yeah, just to be clear, like you said, we have a lot of research into like how good the browsers are at resisting it. We just don't have a lot of research into like how many companies are doing it, what exact techniques they're using, how common it is. I assume it's pretty common. I assume that, a lot of companies are doing it, and they don't tell us because it's kind of like their secret sauce for marketing. And this is why we're so effective. But yeah, it's just, I guess what I'm getting at is I think uBlock Origin and a good privacy browser is probably a lot more effective than we give it credit for. But I mean, I'll definitely never complain about somebody doing, going the extra mile if they feel the need to. So doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I'll just push people towards, I know Nate did a video about it as well. I thought that was quite good. We also did a video, definitely check out, get different perspectives on it, because there's definitely a lot of different opinions, right? Because we've got the Tor people, we've got the Brave people, we've got the Firefox people. They've all got different, we've got the Arc and Fox people. They've got a different perspective than the Tor browser people. So, go to different places for information, try and understand the topic as best as you can. Hopefully the resources that we've put out there is good enough to kind of make a good judgment on it. But like Nate said, like, I feel like when we talk about this stuff, it is kind of an extreme topic. Like, having a privacy browser and uBlock Origin, like Nate said, is like going to be better than 99% of people. So just put it in perspective.
Which, on that note, I've been perusing the live chat here, and I think there's only one question we haven't addressed so far, but it actually kind of touches on this a little bit. And it says, this comes from Anonymous344 here in the StreamYard chat. Threat modeling should be deferred to experts that you personally consult on over and over again. It's unfeasible for an individual to know every single vulnerability and scenario that they have to protect against. Do you guys plan to provide privacy consulting in the near or far future? I mean, I don't speak for everybody around here. I don't think we're planning anything like that as far as I know. I certainly haven't heard anything about it. Probably not would be my guess. Not anytime soon, at least. I don't know if we make I personally do not make far future plans, because you never know what'll happen, right? I've had my long-term plans thrown into chaos multiple times throughout the course of my life. So I've given up on long-term plans. I just worry about the next like 5 years or so and go from there. But I do want to say that threat modeling, I don't think has to be an expert thing, because there's multiple steps to threat modeling, right? And one of those steps is basically figuring out how bad are the risks if I fail. Like that's one of the steps, right? And so I think for a lot of people, like I think that's kind of where we come up with the idea of like a low threat model. If somebody's like, I'm going to pick on people here, but back in the day, I used to see people having like really, really extreme meltdowns where they were like, oh my God, I connected to YouTube once and I didn't have my VPN on. Like, I'm so screwed. And it's like, calm down. It's not that big a deal. Google has one IP address. It probably rotates anyways in a lot of parts of the country or a lot of countries around the world. Like the results for most people are not that big a deal. And again, going to what I said earlier, if your threat model is so high that Google can't have your one IP address, you probably shouldn't be going to YouTube in the first place. But anyways, my point is like, I don't think it's something that everybody necessarily has to go see a professional for. And I say this as somebody who has done consulting in the past. I think, yes, if you have a very high threat model, then yeah, you probably shouldn't just be winging it and trying to piece together a bunch of random websites and YouTube videos. But at the same time, like if you're just like, dude, I'm not an activist, I'm not a political figure, I'm not super, I just want my privacy. I just want to not get targeted ads. I just want people to not be stalking me 24/7, but it's not that big a deal. And I'm not willing to bend over backwards. I mean, that's part of a threat model too, right? How much effort are you willing to go through? Because not everybody is willing to go through the same amount of effort. And I'm going to say that again, because I feel like a lot of people in the privacy community forget that. Not everybody is willing to go through the same amount of effort. And that's fine, as long as like their threat model is being met. So yeah, it's an, I don't know. I think if you want to get consulting, I mean, if that's something you want to do that'll help you sleep at night, go for it. But I don't think it's something that should only be deferred to by experts, because I mean, we're human too. There's no like governing board that certifies privacy experts or anything. So I don't know. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, it's like one of these things where like I feel like, there's certain things where you can just throw money at something and kind of remove a bunch of the effort here. Like I feel like going through and trying to understand what are the best tools, what what do I need to do? Like, it is kind of time consuming. Like Nate was saying, like, not everyone has hours every day to go through and, work out the tools and update things. So, I mean, it can make sense to throw money at something. I don't think you need to. I think everything is available for free. Like, we try really hard to make things accessible to everybody. Like, we don't want to paywall stuff. We offer benefits to members who give us donations, because it's the least we can do for supporting us. But I think if there's something that you want to kind of easy mode, you can talk to an expert. I mean, I'm not going to recommend it. I think all the content is available for free, and we've talked about this before. Like, you can take things slowly. Like, you can just do one thing every month, like when you have a bit of spare time. Like, you don't have to go at I think it was Michael Basil who said this. It's like, privacy is a marathon, not a sprint. And I really like that quote, because I think it's we think about things that we need to do, but I don't think we need to do things immediately, and we don't need to try and blitz through everything in like 2 days. You certainly can if you want, but it's definitely not required. So definitely put that into perspective for you.
I always love telling people how I was that lunatic that sat down one weekend and went, I'm going to move all my passwords to a password manager, and I do not recommend it. But yeah, not to get into a big back and forth, but she said, like, yeah, for the average person, threat modeling is not too high. I mean, everybody should threat model, because that's how you know if you're doing enough. But you're like, going back to the story of the notification leak, surely it would be better to consult an expert for blue team defenses. Yeah, again, if you're working on a professional blue team, if you are an activist who's facing jail time or could potentially, like, sure, at that point. But we don't offer consulting at this time. I don't know if there's any plans to, but I mean, if we do, I'm sure we'll announce it.
I think one thing also to add to this comment, right, is they're saying like threat modeling, like they're saying you should surely be better to consult an expert for blue team defenses. I think, let's be a little bit honest here. This is like a very privileged position to be in. Like, not everyone has the money to just throw this. Like, we're talking about like decentralized groups of activists here. Like, we're not, I don't mean any shade when I say this, but a lot of organizations are not exactly, they're cash strapped, right? Like, they don't have money to do this sort of thing. It's not really that high on their list of priorities. So if it's like a business where they have a certain budget to spend on this sort of thing, obviously makes sense. But that's why I think it's so important to offer this stuff for free, because there are people who are in less privileged positions that also need this information, and it should be accessible, right? So obviously, if in the best case scenario, this person should have consulted an expert for blue team defenses, but I'm pretty sure that this person was probably not someone who had the money or the time to be investing in this sort of protection, I guess. So
yeah, for sure. Taking one more look at the thread here. Doesn't look like anybody's added anything. Anything else you wanted to mention or call out?
Not particularly. I guess if no one's got any extra questions, I guess we can move into the outro here. So all the updates from this week in privacy will be shared on the blog every week. So you can sign up for the newsletter or subscribe with your favorite RSS reader if you want to stay tuned. For people who prefer audio, we also offer a podcast available on all podcast platforms and RSS. And this video will also be synced to PeerTube. Privacy Guides is an impartial, non-profit organization that is focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, then you can make a donation on our website at privacyguides.org. To make a donation, click the red heart icon located in the top right corner of the page, and you can contribute using standard fiat currency via debit or credit card, or opt to donate anonymously using Monero or with your favorite cryptocurrency. And becoming a paid member unlocks exclusive perks like early access to video content and priority during the This Week in Privacy livestream Q&A. And you'll also get a cool badge on your profile in the Privacy Guides forum and the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.